The heat shimmered off the Arizona desert floor like liquid glass. And when Austin Shepard first spotted the figure stumbling through the wasteland, he thought it was a mirage conjured by the merciless sun beating down on the endless expanse of sand and scrub brush. It was August 1882, and Austin had been riding the perimeter of his ranch outside Jerome, Arizona for the better part of 3 hours, checking fence lines and water sources for his small herd of cattle. The copper mining town of Jerome sat perched on Cleopatra Hill in the distance, its buildings clinging to the mountainside like barnacles on a ship's hull. Austin preferred the open range to the crowded, dusty streets of the mining town, though he made the journey there once a week for supplies and the occasional whiskey at the saloon. He pulled his horse to a stop and squinted against the glare, raising one gloved hand to shield his eyes. The figure was real, he realized with a jolt of alarm. A woman in a pale dress, walking with an unsteady gait deeper into the desert away from any semblance of civilization. No horse, no pack, no canteen visible on her person. Austin spurred his roan gelding forward, the animal's hooves kicking up small clouds of dust as they closed the distance. The woman didn't turn at the sound of his approach. She simply kept walking, one foot in front of the other, her dark hair hanging loose and tangled down her back, her dress torn at the hem and stained with dirt and sweat. "Madam," Austin called out when he was close enough. "Madam, stop." She didn't respond, didn't even acknowledge his presence. Austin dismounted quickly, his boots hitting the hard, packed earth with a soft thud. He caught up to her in a few long strides and gently took hold of her arm. The woman flinched at the contact but didn't pull away. When she finally turned to look at him, Austin felt his breath catch in his throat. Her eyes were a startling shade of green, bright as spring grass even in her clearly deteriorated state. Her face was burned red from the sun, her lips cracked and bleeding, her skin covered in a fine layer of dust. She looked at him without really seeing him, her gaze distant and unfocused. "Water," she whispered, the word barely audible. Austin immediately reached for the canteen hanging from his saddle and uncorked it. "Easy now," he said softly, holding it to her lips. "Small sips. Too much too fast will make you sick." She drank greedily, and he had to pull the canteen away after a few swallows. She made a small sound of protest, reaching for it with trembling hands. "In a minute," Austin promised. "First, tell me what in God's name you are doing out here alone. Where are you trying to go?" The woman's eyes filled with tears that cut tracks through the dust on her face. "Nowhere," she said, her voice raw and broken. "Anywhere. It doesn't matter." Austin felt a cold knot form in his stomach despite the oppressive heat. He had seen that look before, in the eyes of men who had lost everything, who had nothing left to live for. The realization of what she had been doing, walking into the desert without supplies, hit him like a physical blow. "Well, it matters to me," he said firmly, keeping his voice gentle but leaving no room for argument. "And you are not walking another step in that direction. I am turning you around and taking you home." "I don't have a home," she whispered. "Then you are coming to mine," Austin said. He let her have another few sips of water, then carefully guided her toward his horse. "Can you ride?" She nodded weakly. Austin helped her into the saddle, then swung up behind her. She swayed dangerously, and he wrapped one arm around her waist to steady her, holding her against his chest. She was burning up, her body radiating heat that had nothing to do with the desert sun. Fever, he realized. Heat exhaustion, dehydration, and who knew what else. "Hold on," he murmured, and urged his horse into a steady canter back toward his ranch. The woman slumped against him, her head falling back against his shoulder. Austin tightened his grip on her, fear making his heart pound. He had found her just in time. Another hour in that desert sun without water, and she would have been past saving. The ride back to his ranch house felt like it took forever, though it was probably no more than 20 minutes. The modest wooden structure came into view, sitting in a small valley with a creek running behind it. It wasn't much, just a two-room cabin and a barn, but it was solid and well-maintained. Austin had built most of it himself over the past 5 years since settling in the territory. He dismounted carefully, then lifted the woman down from the saddle. She was barely conscious now, her breathing shallow and rapid. Austin carried her into the house and laid her on his bed, the only real bed in the cabin. He kept a small cot in the main room where he could sleep. Moving quickly, Austin fetched a basin of cool water from the pump outside and several clean cloths. He dampened one and began wiping the dust and grime from her face and neck, trying to bring down her fever. The woman stirred slightly, her eyes fluttering open. "Where am I?" she asked, her voice slurred with exhaustion. "My ranch about 5 miles outside Jerome," Austin said. "You are safe here. What is your name?" She was quiet for so long he thought she had lost consciousness again. Then she whispered, Lillian Parker." "Well, Miss Parker, I am Austin Shepherd and I am going to take care of you. But I need to know, are you injured anywhere?" "Besides the sunburn and dehydration," Lillian shook her head slightly. "No, just tired, so tired." "Then sleep," Austin said. "We will talk when you are stronger." He continued to bathe her face and arms with cool water, changing the cloths frequently. As the hours passed, her fever gradually began to subside. Austin made a thin broth from salt pork and vegetables, and when Lillian woke again near sunset, he carefully spooned small amounts into her mouth. She managed to keep it down, and some color began to return to her cheeks. By nightfall, she was sleeping more peacefully, her breathing deeper and more regular. Austin sat in a chair beside the bed, watching her in the lamplight, his mind full of questions. What had driven this woman to walk into the desert to die? Where had she come from? Did she have family looking for her? Over the next 3 days, Lillian slowly regained her strength. Austin tended to her with a gentle patience that surprised even himself. He brought her meals, helped her sit up to eat, changed the dressings on the worst of her sunburns. He moved his things to the cot in the main room without complaint, giving her privacy and space to recover. On the 4th day, Lillian was finally strong enough to get out of bed and sit at the small table in the main room. Austin made coffee and set a cup in front of her, then took a seat across the table. "I think it is time we talked," he said quietly, "about what you were doing out there." Lillian wrapped her hands around the tin cup, staring down into the dark liquid. "You already know," she said. "You are not a fool, Mr. Shepherd." "Austin," he said, "and you are right, I am not, but I want to hear it from you, I want to understand." She took a shaky breath. "I came to Jerome 3 months ago with my husband, Thomas. He had heard about the copper boom, thought we could make a fresh start. We had lost everything back in Missouri, our farm foreclosed, nowhere else to go." Her voice was flat, emotionless, as if she were reciting facts that had happened to someone else. "Thomas got work in the mines. We had a room in a boarding house. It was not much, but it was something. It was hope." Austin waited, not pushing, letting her tell the story in her own time. 2 weeks ago, there was an accident in the mine. A collapse. Thomas was killed along with 6 other men. Lillian's voice finally cracked, tears spilling down her cheeks. "The mine company gave me $20 and told me I had to vacate our room within the week. I had no money, no family, no skills that anyone wanted. I tried to find work, but no one would hire me. I had nothing left. No reason to keep fighting." "So you walked into the desert," Austin said softly. "I thought it would be easier than the alternative," Lillian said. "Cleaner." I did not want to end up in some brothel or dead in an alley. At least in the desert it would be quiet, peaceful. Austin reached across the table and covered her hand with his. I am sorry for your loss, Lillian, truly, but I am glad I found you when I did. Why? She asked, looking up at him with those remarkable green eyes. Why do you care what happens to me? You do not even know me. Maybe not, Austin admitted. But I know that every life has value, that you deserve a chance to find out what comes next. And maybe, if you will let me, I can help you figure that out. Lillian studied his face for a long moment, and Austin had the uncomfortable feeling that she was seeing straight through to his soul. He was a solitary man by nature, had been alone since his parents died of cholera when he was 19. He had drifted west, working odd jobs, until he had saved enough to buy this land and start his own small ranch. He had never been particularly interested in marriage or family, content with his own company and the work that needed doing. But something about this woman called to him in a way he could not explain. Maybe it was the fierce will to survive that he saw buried beneath her grief. Maybe it was the way she held herself, despite everything, with a quiet dignity. Or maybe it was simply that she needed someone, and he had always been the kind of man who could not turn away from someone in need. I cannot pay you, Lillian said finally. I have nothing to offer. I am not asking for payment, Austin said. But if you want to earn your keep while you figure out your next step, I could use help around here. The garden needs tending, the cabin needs a woman's touch, and I am a terrible cook. If you are willing to do those things, you are welcome to stay as long as you need. Lillian nodded slowly. I can do that. I am a hard worker, Austin. I will not be a burden. I never thought you would be, he said, and smiled at her for the first time since he had found her in the desert. Over the following weeks, a rhythm developed between them. Lillian took over the cooking and the garden, and the cabin began to feel more like a home than it ever had when Austin lived there alone. She planted herbs near the back door, hung curtains in the windows that she had sewn from spare fabric Austin had tucked away in a trunk. The meals she prepared were simple but delicious, far better than the hardtack and beans Austin had been subsisting on. In return, Austin taught her to ride his spare horse, an older mare named Daisy. He showed her the boundaries of the ranch, the best places to find wild berries, how to read the signs of changing weather in the clouds that gathered over the mountains. They worked side by side, repairing fences, moving cattle, hauling water. It was honest, hard work, and Lillian threw herself into it with a determination that Austin admired. She rarely spoke of her late husband or the life she had lost. Instead, she seemed focused on the present, on building something new from the ashes of what had been. Austin found himself watching her more and more as the summer days stretched into September. The way she laughed at his terrible jokes, the way she hummed while she worked in the garden, the way her face lit up when she successfully roped a fence post on her first try. She was beautiful, yes, but it was more than that. She was strong and resilient and kind, and somewhere along the way, Austin realized he was falling in love with her. The realization terrified him. He had no right to feel this way about a woman who was still mourning her husband, who was only staying at his ranch because she had nowhere else to go. He tried to push the feelings down, to maintain the friendly, respectful distance they had established. But it was getting harder every day. One evening in late September, they sat on the porch together watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. The air had finally begun to cool with the approach of autumn, a welcome relief after the brutal heat of summer. I have been thinking, Lillian said quietly, breaking the comfortable silence between them, about what comes next for me. Austin felt his stomach drop. He had known this conversation was coming, had been dreading it. What have you decided? There is a family in Jerome, the Mitchells. Mrs. Mitchell runs a dress shop, and I heard in town last week that she is looking for help. I thought I might apply for the position. She could probably arrange room and board as part of the wages. I see, Austin said, keeping his voice carefully neutral even as his heart sank. Is that what you want, to work in a dress shop in Jerome? Lillian turned to look at him, her expression troubled. I cannot stay here forever, Austin. You have done so much for me already. I need to stand on my own 2 feet, make my own way. You are standing on your own feet, Austin said. You work harder than most men I know. You have earned your place here, Lillian. This is not charity. Then what is it? She asked, and there was something in her voice, something almost hopeful that made Austin's breath catch. He stood up abruptly, pacing to the edge of the porch. I do not know, he admitted. I just know that I do not want you to leave, that this place feels empty when you are not here. That I have never been happier than I have been these past few months. Lillian stood and crossed to him, her footsteps soft on the wooden planks. Austin, she said gently, look at me. He turned to face her, and the expression in her eyes made his heart pound. I do not want to leave either, she said. But I do not understand what you are asking me, what we are to each other. Austin took a deep breath, knowing that what he said next would change everything between them, for better or worse. I am asking if you think you could ever feel for me the way I feel for you. I know it has not been that long since you lost Thomas. I know you probably still love him, and I would never ask you to forget him. But I am falling in love with you, Lillian. I think I have been since the day I found you in the desert. And if there is even a chance that you might feel the same someday, I want you to stay. Not as my employee or my housekeeper, but as my wife. Lillian's eyes widened, her hand coming up to press against her chest. Austin, I do not know what to say. You do not have to say anything right now, Austin said quickly. Take all the time you need to think about it. I just needed you to know before you made any decisions about leaving that you have another option. One where you would never have to wonder where your next meal is coming from or if you have a roof over your head. One where you would be cherished and cared for the rest of your life. Lillian was quiet for a long moment, her gaze searching his face. Then she reached out and took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. Thomas was a good man, she said softly. But our marriage was not a love match. It was practical, a partnership born of necessity and convenience. He cared for me and I cared for him, but we were never truly in love. When he died, I grieved for what might have been more than for what was. Austin squeezed her hand gently, not sure where she was going with this. What I feel for you is different, Lillian continued. It snuck up on me so gradually that I did not realize it was happening until it was already there. The way my heart lifts when I hear you coming up the path. The way I find myself looking for excuses to be near you. The way I feel safe and valued and seen in a way I never have before. She took a shaky breath. I think I am falling in love with you too, Austin, and it terrifies me. Why does it terrify you? Austin asked, lifting his free hand to cup her cheek. Because I am afraid of losing it, Lillian whispered. Of losing you. I have lost so much already. I do not know if I could survive losing you too. You are not going to lose me, Austin said firmly. I am not going anywhere. I am not working in dangerous mines or taking foolish risks. I am going to be right here on this ranch every single day. And if you will have me, I am going to spend the rest of my life proving to you that you made the right choice. Lillian smiled through her tears, and it was like the sun breaking through storm clouds. Yes, she said. Yes, I will marry you, Austin Shepherd. Austin felt a surge of joy so powerful it nearly overwhelmed him. He pulled Lillian into his arms and kissed her, gentle at first, then deeper as she melted against him. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Austin rested his forehead against hers. "I am going to make you so happy," he promised. "You already have," Lillian said. They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the small church in Jerome. The only witnesses were the preacher and his wife, but neither Austin nor Lillian minded. What mattered was the vows they spoke to each other, the promises they made before God and each other to love and honor for the rest of their days. After the ceremony, they rode back to the ranch together, Lillian sitting side saddle in front of Austin on his horse, her arms wrapped around his waist. When they arrived home, Austin dismounted first, then lifted Lillian down, but instead of setting her on her feet, he carried her across the threshold of the cabin. "Welcome home, Mrs. Shepherd," he said, his voice rough with emotion. Lillian kissed him, pouring all of her love and gratitude and hope into that single gesture. "Take me to bed, husband," she whispered against his lips. Austin needed no further encouragement. He carried her to the bedroom, their bedroom now, and laid her gently on the quilt. The late October sun streamed through the window, bathing everything in golden light. Austin took his time undressing her, kissing each new inch of skin he revealed, memorizing the soft curves and planes of her body. Lillian's hands were equally busy, unbuttoning his shirt, running her palms over the hard muscles of his chest and shoulders. When they finally came together, it was with a tenderness and passion that left them both shaking. Austin was careful with her, conscious that this was her first time with him, that he wanted to make it perfect for her. But Lillian met him eagerly, her body arching against his, her fingers digging into his shoulders as pleasure built between them like a gathering storm. Afterwards they lay tangled together, skin to skin, hearts beating in sync. Austin traced lazy patterns on Lillian's shoulder, marveling at the fact that she was his now, his wife, his partner in all things. "I love you," he murmured, pressing a kiss to her hair. "I love you too," Lillian said, snuggling closer. "More than I thought it was possible to love someone." As autumn turned to winter, Austin and Lillian settled into their new life as husband and wife. The work on the ranch continued, made easier now that they could divide the tasks between them. Austin expanded the herd slightly, purchasing a few more head of cattle with money he had saved. Lillian's garden flourished under her care, providing them with fresh vegetables even as the weather cooled. They made the trip into Jerome together once a week, and gradually the townspeople began to accept Lillian as Austin's wife rather than the widow of a dead miner. There was some gossip, of course, about the speed of their courtship and marriage, but Austin and Lillian paid it no mind. They knew the truth of their feelings for each other, and that was all that mattered. As winter settled over the Arizona territory, bringing cooler temperatures and occasional dustings of snow on the higher elevations, Austin and Lillian spent long evenings by the fire, reading aloud to each other or simply talking. They shared their histories, their dreams, their fears. Austin told Lillian about his childhood in Kansas, about losing his parents and striking out on his own. Lillian told him about growing up in Missouri, about her family farm and the drought that had destroyed it. "You miss it?" Austin asked one night, stroking her hair as she rested her head on his shoulder. "Your family, your old life." Lillian was quiet for a moment, considering. "Sometimes," she admitted. "I miss my mother, though she passed when I was 16. I miss the certainty of knowing where I belonged in the world, but I do not miss the life I had with Thomas, not really. It was hard and thankless, and I always felt like I was just surviving rather than living." She tilted her head back to look up at Austin. "Here with you, I feel alive. Like I am exactly where I am supposed to be." "You are," Austin said, kissing her softly. "You are home, Lillian. Forever." When spring arrived, bringing with it the warmth and renewal of new life, Lillian discovered she was pregnant. She told Austin one morning over breakfast, her eyes shining with a mixture of joy and nervousness. "Are you certain?" Austin asked, his voice hushed with wonder. "As certain as I can be," Lillian said. "I have missed 2 monthly courses now, and I have been feeling queasy in the mornings. I think the baby will come sometime in October, near our first anniversary." Austin was around the table in an instant, pulling Lillian into his arms and spinning her around, laughing with pure happiness. "We are going to have a baby," he said, setting her down gently, suddenly worried he had been too rough. "Are you feeling all right? Do you need to sit down? Should you be working in the garden?" Lillian laughed, touched by his concern. "I am fine, Austin. Pregnant women are not fragile. I can still do all the things I have been doing. I will just need to be a bit more careful as I get further along." "I am going to take such good care of you," Austin promised. "You and our baby both." He was true to his word. As Lillian's pregnancy progressed, Austin took on more of the heavier work around the ranch, insisting that she rest more often. He built a cradle for the baby, carving intricate designs into the wood during the long summer evenings. He rode into Jerome to consult with the doctor, asking what he needed to know about childbirth and how to care for Lillian during her confinement. Lillian bloomed with pregnancy, her skin glowing, her figure rounding in a way that Austin found breathtakingly beautiful. He told her so often, kissing her swollen belly, talking to the baby they could not yet see but already loved fiercely. In late October, just 2 days after their first anniversary, Lillian went into labor. It was a long, difficult birth that lasted through the night and into the next day. Austin stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping the sweat from her brow, whispering encouragement and love. The doctor, a gruff but competent man named Dr. Harrison, had come from Jerome to attend the birth, and he guided them through the process with calm efficiency. Finally, as the sun climbed high in the sky on that October afternoon, a baby's cry filled the cabin. Austin felt tears streaming down his face as Dr. Harrison held up a squirming, red-faced infant. "It is a boy," the doctor announced with a smile. "A healthy, strong boy." Austin looked down at Lillian, who was exhausted but beaming, and kissed her tenderly. "You did it," he said. "You were amazing. Thank you, my love. Thank you for our son." Dr. Harrison cleaned and wrapped the baby, then placed him in Lillian's arms. Austin sat on the edge of the bed, one arm around his wife, gazing down at their child in wonder. The baby had a shock of dark hair and was already showing signs of having his mother's green eyes. "What should we name him?" Lillian asked softly, running a gentle finger over the baby's soft cheek. Austin thought for a moment. "How about William, after my father? William Shepherd." "William," Lillian repeated, testing the name. "I like it." "William Austin Shepherd. Perfect," Austin agreed. The first months of William's life were a blur of sleepless nights and endless joy. Austin had never imagined he could love anyone as much as he loved Lillian, but the love he felt for his son came close. He changed diapers, walked the floor with William when he cried, sang him lullabies in his rough, off-key voice that somehow always soothed the baby. Lillian was a natural mother, patient and nurturing, but Austin made sure she knew she was not alone in the responsibility. They were partners in this, just as they were partners in everything else. On the nights when William was particularly fussy, Austin would bundle him up and take him out to the barn, showing him the horses and talking to him about the ranch, about all the things they would do together when William was older. As William grew from infant to toddler, the ranch prospered. Austin's herd increased, and he began to gain a reputation in the territory for the quality of his cattle. Money was still tight, but they had enough for their needs and a little extra to save. Lillian continued to tend her garden, which had expanded significantly. and she began selling her surplus vegetables in Jerome, adding to their income. They were happy in a way that seemed almost too good to be true. Sometimes, late at night, Austin would lie awake watching Lillian sleep beside him, William in his cradle nearby, and feel overwhelmed by gratitude. He thought about the day he had found Lillian walking into the desert, how close he had come to losing her before he even knew her. The thought always made him hold her a little tighter, treasure her a little more. When William was 2 years old, Lillian became pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, and in the spring of 1886, she gave birth to a daughter they named Grace. The little girl had her father's dark hair and sunny disposition, and from the moment she arrived, William was smitten with his baby sister, insisting on helping with everything from diaper changes to bottle feeding. As the years passed, Austin and Lillian's family grew and flourished. 2 more children followed Grace, another boy named James, and finally another daughter named Ruth. The cabin that had once seemed adequate for a bachelor rancher became crowded with 4 children, and Austin spent a year building an addition, adding 2 more bedrooms and a proper sitting room. The ranch itself expanded as well. Austin hired a couple of hands to help with the work, and he invested in better breeding stock. By 1890, the Shepherd Ranch was one of the most successful small operations in the territory. They were not wealthy by any means, but they were comfortable, and more importantly, they were happy through it all. Austin's love for Lillian only deepened. She was his anchor, his compass, the center around which his entire world revolved. They still made time for each other despite the demands of 4 children and a working ranch, stealing moments of intimacy and connection whenever they could. Sometimes, it was as simple as holding hands while watching the sunset, or sharing a lingering kiss while the children played in the yard. Other times it was sneaking away for a picnic by the creek, or making love in the hayloft like newlyweds. Lillian felt the same way. Austin was her savior in the most literal sense, the man who had turned her around when she was walking toward death and given her a reason to live. More than that, he was her best friend, her partner, the love of her life. She never took for granted the gift she had been given, the second chance that most people never received. On their 10th anniversary, Austin surprised Lillian with a trip to Prescott, the territorial capital. It was the furthest she had been from the ranch since arriving in Arizona, and Austin had arranged for his hired hands to watch the children and the property for the 3 days they would be gone. They stayed in a modest hotel and ate in restaurants, luxuries they rarely indulged in. They walked the streets hand in hand, browsing shops and simply enjoying each other's company without the constant demands of children and chores. On their last night, Austin presented Lillian with a gift, a delicate gold locket on a chain. "Open it," he urged. Inside were 2 small photographs, one of Austin and one of Lillian on their wedding day, somehow preserved all these years. "Austin," Lillian breathed, tears springing to her eyes. "It is beautiful. How did you?" "I have had it for months," Austin admitted. "I wanted to give you something to mark the occasion, to show you how much these 10 years have meant to me, how much you mean to me." Lillian threw her arms around his neck, kissing him deeply. "You are my everything," she whispered. "My whole world, Austin. I love you more than words can express." "I love you too," Austin said. "More today than yesterday and less than tomorrow. That is a promise I intend to keep for the rest of my life." As they lay in bed that night, wrapped in each other's arms, both of them thought back to that day in the desert, the day their story had begun. It seemed like a lifetime ago, and in many ways it was. They were different people now, shaped by love and family and the life they had built together. "Do you ever think about it?" Lillian asked quietly. "About how different things might have been if you had ridden a different direction that day?" "If you had not seen me," All the time, Austin admitted, but not in a fearful way, more in a grateful way. Like I am aware of how lucky I am, how easily I could have missed out on all of this. I think about it too, Lillian said, about how close I came to giving up. And then you appeared, like an angel sent to save me. I am no angel, Austin said with a laugh, just a man who saw someone in need and did what anyone should do. But you did not just save my life that day, Austin. You gave me a life worth living. You gave me love and family and purpose. You gave me everything. Austin kissed her forehead. We gave each other everything, he corrected gently. You saved me too, Lillian. I just did not know I needed saving until you came into my world and filled all the empty spaces I had not even realized were there. The years continued to pass, bringing with them the usual joys and challenges of life. The children grew, each developing their own distinct personalities. William was serious and responsible, taking after his father in his love of the land and the animals. Grace was spirited and adventurous, always getting into some scrape or another. James was quiet and thoughtful, preferring books to outdoor work when given the choice. And Ruth, the baby, was affectionate and charming, able to wrap her parents around her little finger with a smile. Austin taught his sons to rope and ride, to mend fences and doctor sick cattle. He taught his daughters, too, believing that ranch life required everyone to pull their weight regardless of gender. Lillian taught all 4 children to read and write, using the small collection of books they had accumulated over the years and the weekly newspapers from Jerome. She taught the girls to sew and cook, and she taught the boys as well, insisting that they should be able to care for themselves. Together, Austin and Lillian instilled in their children the values that had guided their own lives: hard work, honesty, compassion for those less fortunate, respect for all people, regardless of their station in life. The Shepherd children were well-mannered and well-regarded in Jerome, known for being polite and helpful. As the 1890s progressed, Arizona territory began to change. More people arrived, drawn by the mining industry and the promise of opportunity. Jerome swelled in population, the town spreading further down Cleopatra Hill. The railroad came through, making travel and shipping easier. Modern conveniences that had once seemed impossibly distant began to appear: electric lights and telephone lines and automobiles. Austin and Lillian adapted to the changes while maintaining the core of who they were. They updated the ranch where it made sense, but they never lost sight of the simple, honest life they had built together. When offered a significant sum for their land by a mining company looking to expand, Austin and Lillian declined without hesitation. This was their home, the place where they had fallen in love and raised their family. No amount of money could replace that. By the time Arizona achieved statehood in 1912, Austin and Lillian were in their 50s, their children grown and making their own ways in the world. William had married a local girl and taken over much of the daily operation of the ranch. Grace had married a merchant in Prescott and had 3 children of her own. James had gone east to attend university, returning with a degree and plans to become a teacher. And Ruth, their baby, had just become engaged to a young lawyer in Phoenix. Austin and Lillian found themselves with more time for each other than they had enjoyed since the early days of their marriage. They took long rides together across the ranch land, reminiscing about the past and dreaming about the future. They traveled occasionally, visiting their children and grandchildren, but they always returned home to the ranch with relief, happy to be back in the place that held so many memories. One evening in the summer of 1914, Austin and Lillian sat on the porch watching the sunset, just as they had done countless times over the past 32 years. Austin reached over and took Lillian's hand, marveling at how perfectly it still fit in his, despite the decades that had passed. "Do you remember the first time we sat here together?" he asked. "When you told me you were thinking about leaving and I asked you to marry me instead." Lillian smiled, the lines around her eyes crinkling in a way that Austin found beautiful. "Of course I remember. I was so scared but so hopeful at the same time. I wanted to believe that what I was feeling was real, that it was possible to be that happy after everything I had been through." "And were you?" Austin asked. "Happy, I mean. Have you been happy all these years?" "More than I ever dreamed possible," Lillian said honestly. "There have been hard times, certainly. Times when money was tight or the children were sick or the weather destroyed our crops. But through it all I had you, and that made everything bearable, everything worthwhile." "I feel the same way," Austin said. "You are still the best thing that ever happened to me, Lillian. That day in the desert when I found you, that was the day my real life began. Everything before that was just marking time, waiting for you." Lillian leaned over and kissed him, a soft, sweet kiss that still held all the passion and promise of their youth. "I love you, Austin Shepherd, today, tomorrow, and forever." "Forever," Austin agreed. "That is exactly how long I plan to love you." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of red and gold, Austin and Lillian sat together in comfortable silence, hands clasped, hearts full. They had been given a rare and precious gift, a second chance at life and love when all hope seemed lost. And they had taken that chance and built something beautiful, something lasting, something worth every moment of the journey. Behind them, through the open door of the house, they could hear William and his wife preparing dinner, could hear the laughter of their grandchildren playing in the yard. The ranch stretched out around them, solid and enduring, a testament to decades of hard work and dedication. And above it all, the Arizona sky spread vast and endless, the same sky that had witnessed the beginning of their story so many years ago. Austin pulled Lillian close, and she rested her head on his shoulder with a contented sigh. They had traveled a long road together, from that desperate day in the desert to this moment of perfect peace and happiness. There had been struggles and sorrows along the way, but also more joy than either of them had thought possible. "Thank you," Lillian whispered. "For what?" Austin asked. "For everything. For turning me around that day, for bringing me home, for loving me, for giving me this beautiful life." "Thank you for letting me," Austin said simply. "For choosing to stay, for choosing me. You made all of this possible, Lillian. You made me whole." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Austin and Lillian remained on the porch, wrapped in each other's arms and in the knowledge that they were exactly where they belonged. Their love story had begun in the harshest of circumstances, born from desperation and chance, but it had grown into something profound and unbreakable. They had found each other in the desert, two lost souls who had somehow become each other's salvation. And in the decades since, they had built a life filled with love and purpose and family, proving that even in the darkest moments, hope could survive. That second chances were possible. That love, true love, could conquer anything. The Shepherd Ranch would continue for generations, passed down through their children and grandchildren, each new generation adding their own chapters to the story. But it all began on that scorching August day in 1882, when a cowboy turned a desperate woman around and brought her home, not knowing that in saving her life, he would find his own reason for living. And every day for the rest of their lives, Austin and Lillian gave thanks for that moment, for the twist of fate that had brought them together. They had been given the rarest of gifts, a love that transcended hardship and time, a partnership built on mutual respect and unwavering devotion. They had created a legacy that would endure long after they were gone, but more importantly, they had lived fully and loved completely, never taking for granted the miracle of finding each other. As the years stretched ahead into their 60s and 70s, Austin and Lillian continued to cherish each day together. They grew old side by side, their bodies slowing but their love never diminishing. They sat on that porch every evening when weather permitted, holding hands and watching the sunset, remembering their journey and grateful for every moment they had been given. And when Austin finally passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, with Lillian holding his hand, his last words were of love for her. Lillian followed him 3 years later, surrounded by children and grandchildren, her final breath a whisper of his name. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, under the wide Arizona sky that had witnessed their entire story. Their graves were marked with simple headstones that bore their names, dates, and a single line that captured the essence of their extraordinary love. Together in this life and the next. The Shepherd Ranch continued to thrive under William's careful stewardship and later under his children. The house was expanded and modernized over the years, but the original cabin where Austin and Lillian had first made their home was carefully preserved, a shrine to the love story that had started it all. Generations of shepherd children grew up hearing the tale of how their great-great-grandfather had found their great-great-grandmother walking into the desert, how he had turned her around and saved her life, and how that single act of compassion had sparked a love that created their entire family. It became the foundation story of the family, passed down with reverence and pride. And every year on the anniversary of Austin and Lillian's wedding, the Shepherd family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. They would visit the graves on the hill, lay fresh flowers, and tell the story once more to the newest generation. They would toast to Austin and Lillian, to the power of love and second chances, to the legacy of compassion and devotion that continued to guide their family. The story of Austin and Lillian Shepherd became more than just a family legend. It became a testament to the power of human kindness, to the possibility of finding hope in the darkest moments, and to the transformative nature of true love. It was a reminder that sometimes, when we are at our lowest point, salvation can appear in the most unexpected forms. Austin had simply been a cowboy doing what he thought was right, saving a life because it was the decent thing to do. He had not set out to find love that day, had not been looking for a wife or a partner. But by choosing compassion over indifference, by turning Lillian around and bringing her home, he had set in motion a chain of events that would bring both of them more happiness than they had ever imagined possible. And Lillian, who had given up on life and was walking toward what she thought would be a peaceful end, had been given the gift of a second chance. She had found the courage to accept Austin's help, to trust again, to open her heart to the possibility of love and joy. In doing so, she had not only saved herself but had enriched Austin's life beyond measure. Their story was proof that endings could also be beginnings, that the lowest point in life could be the moment before everything changed for the better. That love, when it was real and true and right, could heal even the deepest wounds and build something beautiful from the ashes of what had been lost. The ranch itself stood as a living monument to their love, each fence post and building a testament to the life they had built together. The creek still ran behind the house, the same creek where Lillian had first learned to fish under Austin's patient guidance. The garden still flourished, now tended by great-grandchildren who knew the story of how their great-great-grandmother had first planted herbs by the back door all those years ago. And on quiet evenings, when the sun set over the Arizona desert in brilliant displays of color, family members would sometimes swear they could feel the presence of Austin and Lillian, still watching over the land they had loved, still together as they had promised each other they would be forever. Their story lived on, inspiring each new generation to lead with compassion, to never give up hope, and to cherish the people they loved with every fiber of their being. Austin and Lillian Shepherd had taken the bleakest of beginnings and transformed it into a legacy of love that would endure for generations, proving that sometimes the most powerful love stories are born from the most unlikely circumstances, and that a single moment of kindness can change not just one life, but countless lives for generations to come.